All right, welcome back to another episode of the Initial NBA Podcast. I'm back with a great episode for you today. I am CJ, as you all probably know. And if you haven't noticed, if you're on Spotify or whatever, you probably haven't. But if you're on YouTube, you have. We got video now. All right, we'll work on the background. It's just one I grabbed off of Canva or whatever. But yeah, if you're still listening to the audio version of this podcast, there is video now. So youtube.com slash the initial NBA show. All right. So today's episode we're gonna talk about the Dame Lillard trade. The big one happened as of right now. It was last Thursday. And then we're gonna touch on some award predictions. That's always fun to do, right? Guess who's gonna win MVP? Get all of them wrong. It'll be great. Before we do any of that, in between me recording my thoughts on the Dame Lillard trade and now, Drew Holiday has been traded as well. So I'm gonna just before we move over to the Dame Lillard side of things, let's just go over kind of what the Drew Holiday portion of this whole thing was. So as you guys probably know, Drew Holiday was traded to Boston for a package of Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, Golden State's 2024 first round pick, and then Boston's 2029 first round pick. So you'll probably hear in the next segment when we talk about the Dame Lillard trade. I would have been shocked if Drew Holiday played any games in Portland. Obviously they're in the midst of, or I guess the beginning of their rebuild. They really don't have much use for a 33-year-old all-star point guard, especially given the young guards they have. Except, that one use I guess they do have out of him is a trade chip, which, that's exactly what they did. They traded him. So from Portland's side, it's a good trade for them. They get 2 more picks. We'll see, I guess, how good that Golden State pick ends up being. There's a shot they win the championship this year, given they still have the best shooter in NBA history. They still got, an older roster, but they still have kind of all their pieces. I guess we'll see what that Golden State pick ends up being. And then Boston's 2029 pick, who knows? That's so far in the future. There really isn't a great... there's no way to predict what that pick is going to be. It could end up in the late 20s in the first round. Could be top 5 overall. I don't think there were any protections on that pick either. So regardless, getting 2 unprotected picks, especially when you're trading a guy that you're not going to use, great gift for Portland. And that goes, in addition to what they already got out of Phoenix and Milwaukee when it comes to the Dame Lillard trade. In this trade, they also got Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams. So I think Robert Williams is a good pickup here, right? He's only 25. He's not a core guy you're going to build around long term, but he's a solid NBA player. And he can contribute positively to a rebuilding team. And with him, they could choose to keep him, or honestly, they could just go ahead and flip him as well. I think that's kind of what has been good about what Portland's been getting back in these trades that they've done, the Dame Lillard one and now the Drew Holiday one. Pretty much every player they've gotten back, there's an option to flip him if necessary. So like I said, Williams is only 25. He's a solid NBA player. I don't think, he's going to be part of the, hey, long-term, you're our guy type of player, but solid rotation piece. He'll contribute. He can't contribute right now. And also there's that option to flip him later. So the other guy, Portland got from Boston, Malcolm Brogdon. Again, he's a good, solid rotation piece. A little bit older. I think he's 30 years old right now. He's kind of mad at Boston, so kind of makes sense. Boston would then end up trading him, just because they've been kind of dangling him out in trade talks all summer. But he's another piece that I think I truly can see Portland flipping him for sure. Again, it doesn't fit on the timeline. He isn't as young as Robert Williams, so I don't think there's as much. There's really not as much of a reason to keep him on the roster. I mean, maybe to mentor Scoot Henderson and some of their younger guards, but honestly, you could. I would be surprised if Brogdon stays in Portland too long. I would bet they probably start the year with Brogdon as maybe probably their backup point guard, and then I would bet they end up trading him near the deadline. He's kind of one of those players that contenders are gonna want when they're looking for point guard depth. So again, I think Portland probably hangs on to him for now, and then we'll see his name surface in trade talks come January and early February. So yeah, good get by Portland. I'm a big fan of kind of how they've been able to turn Dame Lillard and Yusuf Nurkic into, what is it at this point? I think 3 picks, 2 pick swaps, and 3 or 4 players. 3 players. That's a good job by them, I think. Now let's talk about a little bit of the Boston side. They do lose some depth. Obviously, you're getting rid of essentially their 2 of their bench players, but they contributed in the playoffs. And especially at guard, they lose that depth, and in the front court too, I guess, with Robert Williams. I like this for Boston a lot, even though it does kind of leave them a little bit thinner on the bench. They kind of replaced the defense they lost by getting rid of Marcus Smart as part of that Kristaps Porzingis deal, and they also upgrade their offense because, in my opinion, Drew Holiday is still a much better defender than Marcus Smart. So they're essentially able to replace what they lost, I think, while also upgrading offensively from the guard spot. And yeah, it does make them a little bit thin, but in the playoffs, when you're probably cutting down to a 7, maybe 8-man rotation, come playoff time, this is going to be huge for them, assuming health, right? That's always the biggest caveat, because you're looking at a lineup of probably Drew Holiday starting, obviously. Maybe Derek White starting. You'll have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, and then you have some okay bench pieces. You got Peyton Pritchard coming off the bench. You have Kristaps Porzingis. I guess we'll see who ends up starting and coming off the bench. Honestly, if I'm thinking about it now, your starting lineup for Boston, I'd assume, probably ends up being Drew Holiday at the 1, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps at the 4, and Al Horford at the 5, I'd assume, with Derek White kind of being your super sub off the bench. And obviously, as the year goes on, there's going to be times where Derek White's starting or whatever. So, like I said, it leaves them a little bit thin on the bench because you have Derek White, and I know a lot of people like Peyton Pritchard. But outside of that, front court wise, I can't even think of who else they would have in the front court. So, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston ends up doing a little bit more wheeling and dealing at some point near the trade deadline to kind of shore up that front court. So yeah. Good get by Boston, I think. I think good trade by Portland. This is one that works on both sides. All right, now we've kind of talked about the Drew Holiday stuff, now it's time to switch over to what I've already recorded when it comes to the Dame Lillard trade, where we're going to break down every piece of that deal. And again, just a reminder, when I recorded that, Drew Holiday was still technically a member of the Portland Trailblazers. So just keep that in mind when you're listening. I do mention that he was never going to play there, and he was going to demand at least probably multiple first round picks and probably some additional players. And hey, look what Boston traded to get him. Pretty much exactly that. So yeah, let's get to the Dame Lillard trade. All right, it finally happened. Damian Lillard got traded. Let's go over what this looks like from all sides, and I'll give you my thoughts on kind of how all this went down and who got what and what I like and don't like. So just to recap for the trade. Portland gets Drew Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, Toumani Camara, I think a second round pick for Phoenix this year, is who Camara is, a 2028 first round pick swap with the Bucks, a 2029 first round pick from the Bucks, and then a 2030 first round pick swap with the Bucks as well. So that's what Portland got. Big haul. I like their haul a lot. Milwaukee, they got obviously the big prize in all this. They had Dame Lillard, one of the best offensive players ever, top 75 all time. So it's kind of hard to hate what Milwaukee got. And then Phoenix, this is the head scratcher for me personally. They got Yusuf Nurkic, Nasir Little, Keon Johnson, Grayson Allen. So essentially swapping out Ayton and Camara for essentially 4 other role players, and we'll break all this down. So I guess let's start with what I like. So let's start with Milwaukee. Overall, this is an upgrade. right? You're trading Dame Lillard, top 75 all time, for Drew Holiday, who, while is still a really, really good player, not at the same level as Dame. In terms of just the players themselves, they're the same age. There's not any kind of weird, like, hey, you're trading for an old vet that's going to last a couple years and trading a young guy, right? They're the same age, so no problems there. In terms of contracts, Dame is more expensive by about $9 million a year, and he has actually 2 extra years on his deal compared to Drew. But again, given where the Bucks are right now, and given the difference in player, that makes sense from the Bucks, right? You're willing to trade a 2-year deal for a 4-year deal, even if that 4-year deal is much bigger long term, both season by season and the entirety of the contract. So the Bucks, contract wise, makes total sense. Now in terms of the players themselves, right? Dame is a clear upgrade offensively over Holiday. Last year Dame averaged 32.2 points per game. Holiday averaged 19.3, so you're talking a 13-point difference between the guys. Looking at more nerdy stat stuff, Drew was 51st in the NBA in offensive win shares last year. Dame Lillard was 6th, and the difference there is 8.2 versus 3.9. So you're talking pretty much a 4.3 difference in terms of offensive win shares between the two. So Dame Lillard, clear winner a clear upgrade when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. Now here's the thing: you're getting that huge upgrade offensively, but defensively you're taking almost as big of a step back, right? Drew Holiday is a 5-time All Defensive player, including first team last year, and Dame Lillard is one of the worst defensive guards in the NBA. So this is definitely a calculated move by Milwaukee to say, hey, I think we kind of have the pieces where we could take this hit defensively, especially because they have guys like Giannis and Lopez and Bobby Portis and guys like that who are good defensive players. I think they looked at it like, hey, we can make a huge splash, upgrade our offense in a big way, and then we can make up for the defensive deficiencies. Just to give you like number context with that, Drew was 39th in the NBA last year in defensive win shares, which for a guard, that's pretty good, right? Because defensive win share is one of those advanced stats that really leans towards the big man. So Drew was 39th in the NBA at 2.8. Dame was 273rd in the NBA at 0.8 last season. So, kind of shows that you're giving up probably the best defensive guard in the NBA, if not probably top 2 or 3. And you're getting one of the worst. But obviously, there's a calculated thing by Milwaukee. They're getting one of the best offensive players of all time, and probably the second best offensive player of this era. Outside of Steph Curry, I think is number 1, but I think Dame probably is number 2 when talking about this era. Outside of that, in terms of the rest of the counting stats, rebounds, assists, pretty much identical. Both average, around like 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game. Both average between 7.5 assists. So, in a nutshell, this is, hey, we're gonna upgrade offensively, but we're gonna take that downgrade defensively. In terms of what this does for Milwaukee, Lillard and Giannis is immediately is a top 3 duo in the NBA. I think the only other guys that are in that top 3 conversation is Durant, Booker, and Jokic, Murray. So those are the top 3 duos in the NBA. You maybe could argue LeBron, Anthony Davis, but I would have them a clear 4 behind those other 3. And their skill sets when it comes to Giannis and Dame, offensively, their skill set is going to work really well together. You're talking about Lillard, who's that volume scoring point guard, shoot, the second best 3-point shooter ever, maybe. Again, behind Steph Curry. And then Giannis, you have, who can't shoot, but he's kind of the best in the NBA when it comes to slashing, rolling to the basket, playing in transition. And obviously he still has that ability to do some offensive work on ball, be the pick man. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do from the offensive end. I do have questions about kind of how they're going to handle having Dame on the floor defensively. As we know, Dame is a very poor defensive guard. But if there's one team in the NBA that I think can probably figure it out and has the pieces to do so, it's Milwaukee. You have essentially 2 Defensive Player of the Year candidates. In fact, one that has 1 Defensive Player of the Year in Giannis and Brook Lopez. That you can scheme something where you can kind of hide Lillard on the defensive end. So I am a little worried about the step back they're probably going to take defensively, but I think the offense will more than likely make up for it. By far. There is when I first heard of the trade, there was a small part of me that said it felt like a Milwaukee saying, "Oh crap, Giannis has hinted at leaving," because he has made some comments in the last couple weeks before the trade. The part of me was like, is this just a hey, Giannis said he might leave, we need to do something now? There's probably a little hint of that because I really like Drew Holiday as a player anyway. But the more you think about it, I'm like, even if that was maybe partially a reason why they made this trade, it from a basketball perspective, it's still an upgrade. Again, even though I love Drew Holiday as a player, Dame Lillard's better. No one can really argue that. Outside of Drew, they also did lose Grayson Allen. A solid 5th starter, player off the bench, but definitely worth the cost. He's probably replaceable on the Bucks, so definitely worth making that upgraded point guard. Then they gave up that pick and then the 2 pick swaps. With where the Bucks are right now, they don't care about what the picks happening in 2028. They're looking to win now, so from their perspective, 100% worth giving up those picks. They're so far in the future. At this point, it's totally worth it. So that's kind of my thoughts on Milwaukee. Now let's talk about Phoenix. So I'm not stoked if I'm a Phoenix fan personally. As a Nuggets fan, I love this. But as a Phoenix fan, I don't know if I'd be super into this. I get why they did it. So let's talk about like kind of the big swap. They swapped Nurkic for Ayton, right? If you're looking at those 2 guys in a vacuum, that's a clear downgrade. Ayton is a much better offensive player. Maybe not as good of a passer, but definitely a much better scorer. They're trading essentially, Ayton last year, 18 points per game, 10 rebounds per game. And then Nurkic, 13 points per game, 9 rebounds per game. So, there's a little bit of a drop off there. Neither one are really great defenders. There's been this kind of silly, weird narrative over the last like 2 weeks or week or whatever, where people are saying Nurkic is a good defender. He's not. Just stop saying that. He's not a good defender. He is big. He's physical. He uses his body, but he fouls a lot. And he's not. He's just not a great defender outside of his size. So in terms of being on the defensive side, it's probably a wash. Though I will say, again, Nurkic is that big body and he's physical. He uses his body. Whereas, Ayton over the last couple of years has kind of shown a tendency to kind of shy away from contact, which, if you're Phoenix, maybe you do kind of want that. You probably do want that more physical guy. Even if it means you're definitely taking a step back offensively. The one downside I see this for Phoenix is Nurkic hasn't been healthy for a full season in a while. The last time he played at least 65 games in a season was 2018-19. So you're talking 5 years ago since he had what I would consider kind of a healthy season, right? I don't remember what the NBA award cutoff is, but for me, it's 65 games is probably like a good cutoff point where, that's a healthy season. Ayton, on the other hand, has played at least 65 games through the last 5 years. So while Ayton has been banged up, he tends to play a good majority of the season. So, I think there is that risk for Phoenix where, you are risking getting a guy who just hasn't really been as durable. He has a lot of nagging injuries. A couple years ago, I think he broke his tibia, I want to say. So it doesn't come without risks, even if you like the player fit a little bit more. And then with Ayton in particular, I don't know what's going on in Phoenix. I think there's probably blame everywhere, but it seemed like Ayton wasn't necessarily always fully engaged. And I'm not sure how much of that was maybe Ayton himself, how much of it was kind of the culture in the Phoenix organization. How much of that was Monty Williams. So I guess we'll kind of see when with Ayton in Portland, if he kind of has the same issues with, giving up on plays or, having issues with the coaches or front office or whatever, then it's obviously an Ayton thing. But, if things kind of go swimmingly in Portland with Ayton, it does make you question, like, was it an Ayton thing or was it more of a Phoenix culture thing or a, Monty Williams thing that kind of caused that clashing between Ayton and the Phoenix Suns over the years. So I mean, given where Phoenix is already, right? They're offensively, they're set. They're good to go. They got Beal, Booker, Durant. You don't need any more offense if those are your top three guys. So honestly, Nurkic might be. I think he probably is a better fit basketball wise. He doesn't need the ball necessarily to be effective. He's a better rebounder than Ayton. Whereas Ayton, it seemed like he always needed touches to kind of stay engaged in the game. So from that perspective, that's probably a good move by Phoenix. The other thing was, Phoenix with their their big three was always going to need to find a way to get more depth. They did a good job of getting depth in free agency, kind of given what they had to work with. But Ayton was always going to be kind of that trade chip needed to get more depth. So they ended up with Nasir Little, Keon Johnson, and Grayson Allen as part of this deal. The Grayson Allen especially he's a good depth piece, right? He's going to be part of the rotation. And then Little and Johnson, I guess we'll see. But I mean, honestly, like they don't really move the needle for me. I guess when you're talking about probably playoff basketball, you're essentially swapping Ayton for Grayson Allen and Nurkic. I don't know if that really does much. I think that probably comes out in a wash. Especially with, I think Phoenix already did a pretty good job of rounding out their roster and their depth, given they didn't have much to work with in free agency. So, I guess we'll see what happens. But, as for Phoenix, I'd give it like a C. I'm like, I get why they did it. I personally probably wouldn't have done it, but I also kind of like Ayton. He has the ability to potentially be an all-star, whereas Nurkic, we know who he is, and he's hurt a lot. So I guess you're kind of making that gamble, trading kind of the more talented guy for Grayson Allen with depth, and Nurkic, who might be a slightly better basketball fit. Now let's go to Portland. I love what Portland got for this trade. I give them an A+. Whatever the highest grade is for trades, give it to Portland. I mean, I'm so into with what they did with this. I think they got probably the best possible return they could have gotten given the situation they were in. So, I mean, we already talked about Ayton and Nurkic. That's an obvious upgrade from a talent perspective and an age perspective, right? So, Ayton is a better player than Nurkic. I don't know if anyone would really argue that. And if you do, that's insane to me, personally. But Ayton also fits their timeline better. Their Scoot timeline, I should say. He's only 25. He's, a big man that has all-star potential. He's a former number 1 overall pick. Pair him with Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe and Anthony Simons. Like, you got a good start there when you're rebuilding if you're Portland. Like I said, Ayton has the potential to be an all-star player. There's a good possibility that at least some of the issues he had with Phoenix was more Phoenix son Monty Williams issue and not necessarily a DeAndre Ayton issue. I guess that will remain to be seen, but given that Ayton will probably he'll be the number 2 right behind Scoot Henderson. I think he has a better opportunity to probably stay engaged if the issue is him not getting touches is kind of why he had those issues in Phoenix. Also with Portland, the picks that's a great return, getting those picks from Milwaukee. Those picks, it's a swap in 28, a full getting Milwaukee's 29 first round pick, and then a swap in 2030. There's a decent chance Milwaukee is rebuilding in 2028, 2029, and 2030. Given Giannis and how that situation may play out in the next couple years, let's just pretend. Let's play pretend, right? What if, the Dame Lillard experiment this year doesn't really work out? Like, maybe someone gets hurt, whatever. But regardless, they end up not winning a championship over kind of this, 3 to 4 year window they have with Lillard and Giannis. If that happens, I think there's a decent chance that Giannis finds a way out from Milwaukee, whether that's through trade or free agency, whatever. I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not sure what Giannis is when his contract is set to expire. But if it doesn't work out over the next 4 years for Milwaukee, and Giannis ends up wanting out, that puts Milwaukee in a situation where they essentially don't own any of their picks for between 28, 29, and 30 that they're going to be rebuilding. So when it comes to Portland, this is an awesome gamble by them to say, hey, we're going to take these picks. There's a chance that, Milwaukee is still competing for championships in the late 2020s. In that case, the picks probably weren't necessarily worth it. They're going to get, late first round picks out of these. But then there's also the chance that they're picking, in the lottery these 3 years, getting an extra pick. And as far as I've read, there haven't been any protections on any of these picks. So, that's an even bigger, even more reason to love the gamble by Portland. So we talk about picks. We talk about all the players except from one going to Portland. Drew Holiday. This, honestly, if Portland would have just gotten Ayton in the picks, I'd have been like, you know what? That's a pretty good trade. Like, given where Portland was and the situation they found themselves in, which we'll talk about the Miami thing in a minute. The fact they're also able to get Drew Holiday back, huge. Obviously Drew Holiday doesn't fit in Portland, right? He's 33 years old, just like Dame. He is, a 2-time All-Star, 5-time All-Defense. He's in the point of his career where he's playing for championship. But he is a great trade chip. He's going to demand at least a first-round pick, if not 2, or a first-round pick and some young player or group of young players, whatever it is. And Drew Holiday is the type of player every contender wants a Drew Holiday on the team, every single one. So I don't think they're gonna have any issues finding a suitor. I don't expect him to play a game for Portland, honestly. To be real, I'd be surprised he isn't dealt by the beginning of the season. I think, by the time the season starts on October 24th, Drew Holiday has found a new home. I think it was, Portland released a video on social media today. It's September 30th, with Ayton and the other guy they got from Phoenix, exploring the facility and things like that. And there's a reason Drew Holiday wasn't in that video, because they don't expect Drew Holiday to be a member of the Portland Trailblazers. So, I mean, just the fact that Portland got another really good asset that they're going to be able to flip for more first-round picks for young talent, great get by them. Now, I guess let's just touch on Miami. So, obviously, that's who was talked about over the last 2-ish whatever months. But I think this is a situation where Miami just didn't have the assets, man. Like, as much as people wanted Dame to go to Miami, and as much as Dame himself wanted to go to Miami, I mean, given what the return that Portland got, Miami couldn't come close to getting to having what it took to get Dame. Portland essentially they got 1 to 2 all-star players, kind of depending on what you think about Ayton and what his potential ceiling is. I think he can 100% be an all-star center. Other people are kind of out on Ayton. I think part of that might be the situation in Phoenix rather than Ayton himself. Well, I guess we'll see, but so we'll just call it 1.5 all-star players. In addition to a first and 2 swaps, and obviously Drew Holiday, he's going to command at least another first-round pick and probably another young player or additional picks with that. Miami just couldn't come close to having the assets to get Dame, with the exception of if they included Bam or Jimmy Butler, but they were never going to do that and would have defeated the purpose. So I know Miami was always the one that was talked about, and I personally never really saw that happening, given what Miami had to offer. The other one that was rumored that I just want to mention that it never made any sense to me was Toronto. That kind of popped up in the last the week leading up to the Dame trade. But even with Dame Lillard, Toronto isn't a contender, so it's one of those where why would they even do that? And in all likelihood, they would have likely had to have given up one of Siakam, Anunoby, or Barnes, which 100% would have defeated the purpose of getting Dame Lillard anyway. So that was a weird one. Don't know where it came from. Maybe it was just smoke and BS or whatever, but that was weird. And Toronto honestly should probably just start selling the farm, start over. So yeah, that's my take on the Dame Lillard stuff. Again, love what Portland got. Like what Milwaukee did and what they had to give up, because now them and Boston are the 2 top contenders in the East. I still have Denver as the overall favorite for me, but I am biased. I'll admit that. And then for Phoenix, I get what they did. Not a huge fan, but there is a decent shot. I do think it's probably a better basketball fit, even though they probably lost if you're looking at just the talent itself. So yeah, Dame Lillard in Milwaukee. Who would have thought? All right, let's talk some NBA awards. Right, let's talk some award predictions for the season. Obviously this is educated guessing, right? If I hit on one of these, I'll be like, oh hey, called it. So yeah, I have rationale. Let's go through the list of NBA awards. Kind of talk through who I think is poised to win each of these awards over the next year. So I guess let's start with the big one, right? MVP. Let's start with MVP. So with all these, I took a look at kind of past winners and tried to find patterns in what I saw. And here's what I found for MVP. So going back 20 years. The guy that's won MVP has had a top 6 MVP finish in the previous year for the most part. There's 2 exceptions to this. Derrick Rose and his award, and then Steve Nash's first MVP. Outside of those 2 guys, since I think about 2002, every single MVP winner had a top 6 finish the year before. So, that's a pretty good percentage of winners having kind of that in common. So, taking that list, that leaves us kind of the contenders for MVP next year. I see as being Embiid, Jokic, Giannis, Tatum, SGA, and Donovan Mitchell. A lot of those guys, I don't think that's a surprising list. Maybe Mitchell and SGA, but they were both awesome last year. So, I would feel pretty safe that, the MVP coming from that particular list. So now to narrow that down. So, in almost every case, the MVP is the best player on a contender, with the exception of someone going absolutely crazy, having a ridiculous year for, a good team, but not a contending team. The way I have the season kind of playing out, I think the Thunder will be better, but I think there's still going to be a 5-6 seed, so that probably doesn't put them in that contender status. So I think that probably knocks SGA out of contention for MVP. And then the other one's Mitchell. Again, I think the Cavaliers are going to be good. They definitely have a shot of being a top 3 seed, I think more so than the Thunder. But as of right now, I have them finishing 4th in the East. So, usually when I think of contenders, it's a top 3 seed in a conference, a lot of times top 2. So that for me, that probably knocks Mitchell out of contention for MVP. So there's 2 out. Then there's Embiid. So obviously last year he had a really bad playoffs. And I think whether it's fair or not, that may end up hurting him. I think a lot of voters may give pause regardless of how well he plays and whether it's fair or not, which it probably isn't fair. I think a lot of voters probably have some pause giving, making him a back-to-back MVP award winner with how poorly his playoffs were this last year. So in all honesty, I don't think Embiid really has a shot of MVP this next year just because of that. Again, I don't think it's fair. It probably isn't fair. But that's just kind of how the public perception is with the NBA nowadays. So of the 6, that leaves us kind of 3 contenders for MVP, right? You have Jokic, you have Giannis, and you have Tatum. All 3 guys are ones who I think will be on top 2 seeds in their respective conferences. They're going to be on 3 of the top 5 or 3 of the top 4 teams in the NBA. I don't think that's definitely not crazy to say. But Jokic and Giannis both already have 2 MVP awards to their name. And there's definitely hesitation to give guys a third. When you talk about who has 3 MVPs, now you're in very rare air. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, those types of guys. So unless Jokic or Giannis have an absolutely monster, ridiculous season that even destroys their own standards, which are already ridiculously high to begin with, I don't see them winning MVP either. And that hurts. I'm a Nuggets fan. I'm wearing Nuggets stuff right now. So yeah, I don't think Jokic and Giannis, those would be kind of maybe second and third in the MVP voting this next year. So that leaves my pick at MVP is Jason Tatum. The Celtics have an incredible team around him. He's the unquestioned number 1 in Boston. Even with another All-NBA caliber player there in Jaylen Brown. And then, Boston has a really, really good shot of just running away with the East. There's pretty much no scenario where they're not a top 3 seed. So I like Tatum. And let's not forget, Boston is, and this, again, fair or not, Boston is one of the most prominent media markets in basketball. There's a lot of national writers and sports columnists and sports people from Boston who have a vote for MVP. It probably won't help him much, but I think it definitely will help his case a little bit. So for MVP this next year, I got Jason Tatum. Just for all the reasons I already outlined, and I think it's a pretty safe bet. So yeah, MVP. All right, next up, let's talk Defensive Player of the Year. So similar to MVP, a lot of Defensive Player of the Year winners, they have a history of kind of a top 5-ish finish in Defensive Player of the Year voting. This award is pretty much just given to bigs and wings. There's very rarely guards that win nowadays. I think Marcus Smart is really the only recent example I saw. And then this award is very much reputation based, right? I mean, we have some analytics to give us information about defense, but if we're being real, it's all reputation, eye test type of stuff. Analytics are great, but they still kind of struggle to capture what players do on the defensive end, I think. So with all that said, I think the Defensive Player of the Year is between 3 guys, all big men. I think, again, just based on reputation, which this award is, very much reputation based. All have a good shot. Jaren Jackson Jr., Evan Mobley, and Bam Adebayo. I think these are 3 pretty safe bets for Defensive Player of the Year. Even though Evan Mobley is still super young, he's a ridiculous defensive player already at how young, especially with how young he is. And I think that's my pick. I think Evan Mobley continues to be a defensive force. The Cavaliers are going to be a really good team. And I think it would even help, if Evan Mobley even takes a little bit of a step offensively. I think that even helps his defensive player of the year argument. Just because, everyone likes offense, and if a player is, has some offensive game to him, that's going to just, say, hey, he's a total package. And I think that in a weird way helps his defensive player of the year reputation. Because then he won't be known as like this one trick shot blocking pony, right? He's a more of an all around player, which, again, I think will help him on the defensive end. So I have Evan Mobley as my defensive player of the year for this upcoming season. All right, let's go 6th man of the year. So, and like a lot of these awards, there's a pattern to how they're awarded, who gets them, the archetype of player who gets these awards. So, like defensive player of the year, it's very commonly, almost always going to a big or a wing. Now, 6th man of the year is almost the polar opposite. This award commonly goes to a high volume scoring guard. Think of some of the past winners, right? Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, Jordan Clarkson, Tyler Hero. Those are some of the recent winners. All scoring guards off the bench, high volume shooter type of players. And kind of backing that up, I found this kind of interesting when looking at previous winners for 6th man of the year. Since 2000, there's only 5 winners, so 23 years. There's only been 5 winners that have shot less than 80% from the free throw line. So, in a large majority of these cases, it's a player that, are amazing shooters, right? They shoot from a super high clip from the free throw line. And there's only 2 that have shot less than 75% from the free throw line in the line, since 2000. Maybe it's a coincidence, but I think it just kind of shows the type of player this award goes to. It goes to someone who is a really good shooter, volume scorer obviously off the bench because it's a 6-man award type of guy. Like I said, very much guard dominated. Montrezl Harrell, Lamar Odom, Antoine Jamison are the only non-guard winners in the last, about 20 years. And then, this award's usually going to kind of a higher end playoff team. At least it has recently. So that's kind of the criteria. And then also, all winners but one over the last 20 or so years have averaged at least 14 points per game. Looking at kind of the rosters and who is projected to come off the bench, and this award is weird because, depending on team need, 1 year a guy maybe a 6-man candidate gets a different role, no longer really qualifies, right? But the 3 that kind of stand out to me as candidates that kind of fit this volume scorer guard archetype that this award is pretty much meant for is Buddy Hield in Indiana, Emmanuel Quickley in New York, and then Malik Monk in Sacramento. Those are kind of the 3 that popped out when I was going through rosters to see, who is a real 6 man of the year candidate. With Buddy Hield, Indiana may not be good enough for Hield to win. I think they're going to be a better team than they were last year. I think they made some good improvements. But there's definitely a shot they're kind of just in that playoff or play-in. They finished in that like play-in seeding, right? Which, if that's the case, I think that kind of hurts Buddy Hield's chances to win. And I know this is an individual award, but in almost all of these cases, except for probably Rookie of the Year, team success does matter to an extent because there are those old curmudgeon-y voters, and maybe not also old curmudgeon-y, but there are a lot of voters that take that into account. Did you help your team win, regardless of what the award is? So I think that's going to hurt Buddy Hield. So that kind of knocks him. Of those 3, probably puts him 3rd in my opinion. So then it kind of leaves it between Quickley and Monk. Again, both volume shooter type guards, shoot a high percentage, both on good playoff teams, right? The Knicks finished I think 4th last year, was it 5th? Yeah, it was 5th last year in the East. And Sacramento finished 3rd, right? And I would expect both those teams to have similar-ish finishes this next year. However, I think for 6 man of the year, I'm going to go with Emmanuel Quickley. he averaged a bit higher point per game last year than Malik Monk. And I think he has kind of more potential to increase that total, maybe by a couple points, which at that point I think helps his case a lot. Having that kind of average, points per game being slightly higher than what I think Malik Monk will do. So yeah, I got Emmanuel quickly, and with all these, after I kind of figured out who I was choosing, I just took a sneak at like DraftKings odds, because Vegas usually, they have a pretty good feel for this stuff, right? Because they have their money on the line, obviously. And quickly actually is the betting favorite right now on DraftKings, or it was when I was doing the research. So it kind of, after doing all the research and then looking at that, I was like, oh, okay, I have some sound logic here. Now for probably the easiest one, Rookie of the Year. It's Victor Wembanyama, right? I think I don't know if anyone else really has a case, assuming injury, right? With all of these injuries going to play a big part. If Wemby ends up playing 30 games, there's no way he's winning Rookie of the Year. But again, I think assuming health, Wembanyama is going to win Rookie of the Year. This is the easiest one on this list by far. He's the best draft prospect since LeBron, probably. So, talking the last 20 years, best rookie we've seen, at least from a talent perspective. He's going to play a lot as a rookie. The Spurs suck. No offense to Spurs fans, but I think the Spurs aren't very good right now. But they're super young and they're rebuilding. So he'll play a lot, and he's already the best player on the Spurs, and he hasn't played an NBA minute. I don't think that's insane to say. They have some talented guys, but Victor Wembanyama is on another level compared to everybody else. He'll average something like 18 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2 to 3 blocks. He'll be he'll be an issue defensively, right, for other teams. He's going to cause problems defensively with just his length and size. So I think that stuff will make him a landslide. Obviously Wemby's a runaway, but I mean, I guess if I was like, maybe this guy will be in the conversation, maybe. I think Chet Holmgren and Scoot Henderson are probably the two other guys that, if you were to take anyone besides Wemby for Rookie of the Year, those are probably the two I would pick. The issue is that, Chet's surrounded by a bunch of talent in Oklahoma City. So how much is Chet really going to have to do during his rookie year? Wemby essentially is the only guy on the Spurs. He's going to have to carry the Spurs. Chet already has an all-NBA player that he's playing with. And then you have other ridiculously talented guys like Giddey, and then Jalen, the Williamses, right? So, I think Chet will be in the conversation, maybe, probably come second or third, but I don't think Wemby's going to win that. And then Scoot's the other guy that came to mind is, hey, maybe he has a puncher chance of winning Rookie of the Year. But if we're being real, Scoot may be behind Lillard to start the year. Lillard is still not out of Portland, and Lillard doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would hold out into the season. So, if Scoot isn't starting to start the year, isn't playing as much to start the year, that's going to hurt his chances too. So, yeah, Rookie of the Year, runaway is going to be Victor Wembanyama, assuming health. So yeah, that's Rookie of the Year. Let's go to the All NBA teams. I did All NBA for these too. Defensive teams, rookie teams. We got all the awards here, so we're just gonna roll with it. This is who I have for All NBA first team. I think it's pretty self-explanatory for these guys, but we'll touch on them quick. So one guard spot, we got Devin Booker. Suns are going to be nuts this year. They're going to be a top 3 seed in the West. Booker is their best player. I love Kevin Durant, but I think Booker at this point is a better player than Kevin Durant. Barely. And Kevin Durant's still a top 10 player, but Booker's nuts. The other guard spot, I got Luka Doncic. Again, he's going to carry the Mavs. I don't think there's any surprise there. Kyrie Irving is there, but let's be real. Kyrie Irving is the number 2 to Luka Doncic. I don't think anyone could realistically argue that with, any actual valid argument. So Booker, Doncic is the guards. Forwards, again, two top 5 players in the league. You got Giannis, you got Jason Tatum. Those are my 2 forwards. They're both going to be the 1 and 2 seed in the East in all likelihood, how I see it. So I think they're safe NBA all first team. And then the center, you got the best center in the NBA and probably the best player in the world, in my opinion. Again, I'm a little biased, but whatever. That's what sports is about. I'll take Nikola Jokic at center for all NBA first team. They're the Nuggets, I think, are going to be the number 1 seed again this year, and I think they're going to be even better during the regular season. So, Nikola Jokic, I think, is a safe all NBA first team. And part of that, again, we talked about it earlier with MVP. Joel Embiid, with his performance in the playoffs this last year, that's going to be like a hangover from like a national media awards perspective, I would bet. It's always going to be lingering, at least for this year, when we talk about these awards and things like that. Second team, again, I don't think I think there's one surprise in here. I have, for the guards, no surprises. I got SGA in Oklahoma City. We talked about him. He's nuts. And then Donovan Mitchell is the other. Again, he's probably a top 4 to 6 guard in the NBA. And he's also very young still, which kind of plays into, why I have Donovan Mitchell over Steph Curry, who was on my third team, actually. I think age, especially during the regular season, it does matter, especially because like a team like Golden State, players on their team are, as long as they're in the playoffs, they're dangerous, right? So I can see, Donovan Mitchell getting that second team spot over Steph Curry, kind of based on that. My 2 forwards, Kevin Durant from Phoenix, obviously is one of the best players ever. So he's no surprise there. Here's where I could get yelled at. Maybe not yelled at. People will be like, what? I kind of don't like the forwards in the NBA, just in general, when it comes to all NBA. So second team all NBA, I have Mikal Bridges. And here's why. After he got traded from Phoenix last year. So first off, let's talk about him as a player. He is an all-around gamer, right? Defensive. He's a really good defensive player. He showed offensively he's a really good player. He can carry a team. The Nets don't have a whole lot of other options. After after he got traded last year to the Nets, I think at one point he was averaging like 28 a game or something. It was some stupid high number that you're like, that Mikal Bridges is scoring that many points per game. He's still super young, and again, one more year, he finally has his own team. In Phoenix, he was kind of the Swiss Army knife, do it all, like probably third option at best. Behind Booker and eventually Chris Paul and guys like that. I like him to make a pretty big leap. So I actually have him projected as my other forward for second team all NBA. Again, that's a bold claim, but I dig it. I'm in for it. And again, the forwards, the forward depth in the NBA seems to just kind of be, I don't know, it's just not as stacked as it feels like it used to be. So yeah, those are forwards, and then at center, second team all NBA, it's got to be Joel Embiid. He's the second best center in the NBA. It's him and Jokic. I think Jokic is clearly above Embiid, and then Embiid is clearly above everyone else. So I think there's a pretty easy and obvious pecking order when it comes to centers in the NBA of all NBA teams and things like that. All right, third team, I have Steph Curry. It would feel wrong to not have Steph Curry on one of these teams because he's still the best shooter alive and that has ever lived and probably will ever live. So I had to have Steph Curry on the third team. And then again, the other guard on my third team, again, I don't think this is a really big surprise. I have Anthony Edwards. I like him to take another leap this year. He played really well in the playoffs. I think of all the guys the Nuggets played in the playoffs, Booker scared me the most, and Anthony Edwards scared me the second most. He is ridiculous. So I like him to make an All-NBA team this year. Now with forwards, again, I didn't love the depth in the NBA when it comes to forwards. Right now I have LeBron James and Jaren Jackson Jr. LeBron is in year 20, 21, 22. He's old, bro. But he's still crazily enough one of the better players in the NBA. Top 15. I don't think I don't know how you would argue that. He's a top 15 player. And then Jaren Jackson Jr., I mean, Defensive Player of the Year last year. Ja is going to be out to start the year, so maybe that, puts a little more spotlight on him and he kind of gets off to a hot start. But I like Jaren Jackson Jr. as the other forward. And then center, I got Bam Adebayo. I think it for me, it was between him and Domantas Sabonis as kind of that third best center in the NBA. So that leaves some omissions, right? So when it comes to guard, there's a lot of guys who I like. I went with, obviously I went with Booker, Doncic, SGA, Mitchell, Curry, Edwards. I don't think that's wrong. But the other guys I have that I think, there were tough omissions. They, have a shot. Jamal Murray, we'll see if hopefully the playoff thing kind of carries over to the regular season. But if I'm going to be real, if it's just a playoff thing, I'm not going to complain with how ridiculous he was in that run. But, Jamal Murray now has, I think the cachet, like he has that everyone loves Jamal Murray now, basically is what I'm trying to say. Whereas this time last year, they're like, is he more than a above average point guard? It's like, yeah, the dude's one of the best point guards in the NBA. And if you don't agree, then you just haven't watched him play, I guess. Okay, other guards I got: De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson. We got Damian Lillard. You could choose. There's so many good guards in the NBA. It's ridiculous. The forward omissions. Again, I wasn't after looking at the forwards in the NBA. I wasn't in love with the depth. Tough omissions I had though were Jimmy Butler. I think he's getting older, but he's a turn off on when the playoffs come around type of guy. And then Paul George, Pascal Siakam, and then I also have Paolo Banchero on here. He played really well last year. I think there's an outside chance maybe that he could maybe sneak into that third team. And then the other one, I actually forgot to write him down, but as I was doing this, I remembered he existed. And this, I'm sorry, Lakers fans, but Anthony Davis is also probably part of this tough omissions as well. Again, with him, he has all the talent in the world, probably top like 3 to 5 player in the NBA in terms of just talent. It's just at that point, it's going to come down to health, right? So I'd put him as a tough omission. And honestly, if I was doing this list over again, I might have him above LeBron for third team All NBA. And then the tough omission is center, Domantas Sabonis. I don't know if there's really anyone else that is in that conversation for All NBA for center. I think that position seems to be pretty cut and dry. Jokic, Embiid, Adebayo, Sabonis, top 4. I'm sure there's someone I'm missing, I guess. Just, tweet at me on social media if you remember somebody, but those are the guys I got. Now for all defensive team. Now, all defensive team, like defensive player of the year, there's a lot of reputation that goes on here. So I wasn't going to try to reinvent the wheel. I was like, hey, who's a good defender, where I agree, and also who also at least got some votes last year, because that's also going to be a factor for this. Because again, defense, reputation based, there aren't a lot of numbers. Your average voter, I'm sure a lot of them know basketball very well, but for being real, they're probably not watching every, more than a handful of games for each team. And if you're just trying to watch a game, it may be hard to focus on the defensive aspects. So my all defensive first team I got as my guards, Alex Caruso, Marcus Smart. My forwards, Evan Mobley, Jaren Jackson Jr. My center, Bam Adebayo. Again, I don't think any of this is surprising. Mobley, Jackson, Adebayo, those are the 3 guys I have as kind of in contention for Defensive Player of the Year. Marcus Smart, former Defensive Player of the Year. And then Alex Caruso is just a damn good defender. I know the Bulls kind of are in this like no man's land, but at least they have one guard that is a really, really good defender. All defensive second team. Again, I don't know if there's really too many surprises here. For my guards, I got Drew Holiday and Herb Jones. Holiday, perennial defensive team guy, multi-time All-Star. And then Herb Jones, kind of more of a young up-and-comer dude, but a guy's an awesome defensive player, and everyone loves him. My forwards, I got Giannis, no surprise. Mikal Bridges, no surprise. They're two of the best wing defenders in the NBA. And then center, I got Walker Kessler. That guy came in as a rookie and was an awesome defensive player. So I kind of expect him to do the same. Now there's one obviously glaring omission here. That would be Rudy Gobert, right? But that's the thing with all defense. There's there's the logjam at center. At least you can go Adebayo. I really like Walker Kessler. And then there's Brook Lopez. Was in, I think, made an all defensive team recently. I think it was last year actually. Rudy Gobert. So, in all honesty, Gobert probably makes it over Walker Kessler just because of reputation. But I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna take Walker Kessler. It's my second team, all defensive center. That's all defensive teams. All rookie, first team, Victor Wembanyama, duh. Scoot Henderson, duh. Chet Holmgren, duh. I think those are the three that I kind of have, in the running for Rookie of the Year, even though we all know who's going to win that. They're all going to have ample opportunity to play. In Holmgren's case, he's going to have a good opportunity to actually, contribute to a winning team, whereas Henderson and Wembanyama are going to play a lot. The other two guys I have on the first team are Brandon Miller. Charlotte's not going to be good, but Brandon Miller's going to play a lot. It's also, a high draft pick for a reason. And then I have one of the Thompson twins, Sir Thompson. That's who I have in my rookie first team. Rookie second team, I have Amen Thompson, the other Thompson twin. I have Jaime Jaquez Jr. I think he's probably going to play a lot, whether that be in Miami or in Portland. Regardless, I think he's going to play a good amount of basketball because there's going to be rotation minutes on both of those teams, regardless of where he ends up due to the Damian Lillard stuff. Cam Whitmore is who I have as well. I think he's going to get a lot of minutes down in Houston. Keontae George, he's going to get a lot of minutes in Utah, and he looked really good in the Summer League, if that even matters for anything. And then the last one I have is Anthony Black. I really like what Orlando's doing, and I like Anthony Black in terms of like what he is as a prototype of as a player, like that really big like vision guard type of guy. So I'll throw him on my all rookie second team. All right, last player award. Left this one for last. I don't know why I put this one last. I think it was just the last one I did. But most improved. So there's one general rule kind of about this award. It's not really a rule, but it's kind of an unspoken rule. It doesn't really go to a second-year player. They're kind of expected to make that leap from their rookie year to their sophomore year. So it's kind of one of those things where they're just not really awarded this. In the last 20 years, all but 3 of the players that won this award were between the ages of 22 and 25. Makes sense. We're looking at most improved, but there's like that 3-year window that generally the winners of this award kind of end up in. And then at least recently, the winner's been a first-time All-Star. So those are kind of the parameters we're looking at, right? So a first-time All-Star who, takes a big leap between the ages of 22 and 25, not really a second-year player. So the guys that I kind of have for this award as like kind of contenders, I guess, Anthony Edwards, which with Anthony Edwards, he might already be too good to win this. I think he's already an all-star. But we already I don't want to say we've anointed him as the next superstar, but it kind of feels that way. Like he was the guy on Team USA at the FIBA World Cup. Um, I think he's already the best player on the Timberwolves. Um, I think he might already be too good to win Most Improved. Like unless he made a jump to being a top 3 player in the NBA, which I think that's a crazy leap. Anthony Edwards is, I think that in Vegas, I think he's one of the contenders. But I think he might already be too good to win Most Improved. The other guy, kind of in a similar boat, Mikal Bridges. He's similar to Edwards, where he hasn't been an All-Star yet. But I think his numbers at the end of last season may have actually hurt his chances of winning Most Improved this coming up season. Which it's the Most Improved. Like honestly, who cares? But he ended the season averaging 26 points per game with the Nets. I think a lot of NBA people already say, oh, he's already like that borderline all-star player anyway. He might already be too good to win Most Improved. And then there's a couple more I had. Evan Mobley's another one that I think it's in the conversation. He would need to improve offensively. That's his big thing. But also he's going to be the third wheel at best offensively on the Cavs. And if we're being real, this award probably is going to go to someone who predominantly is an offensive player rather than a defensive player. So while Evan Mobley, I think, has a shot at the Most Improved, he may not quite have the opportunity offensively, and he would need to improve greatly on the offensive end. So thought I mentioned him, but he's not one of the two I've narrowed it down to. So there's two guys that I've kind of narrowed this award down to. Jordan Poole and Cade Cunningham. So with Jordan Poole, obviously we know what he's done. He is a electric shooter and scorer who has kind of been in the Curry shadow. But to me, I think moving from Golden State to Washington, I think might have been the change he needed for his career. It's funny, his rookie year, I think he graded out as like the worst player in the NBA or second worst player in the NBA when it comes to like some of the advanced analytics. But then he had that second year leap where he was incredible, and you're like, this is a future star, right? And then last year, there's the whole Draymond Green thing, and he just is, he still tries to be that electric guy, that essentially like Curry light, I guess. But he also makes a lot of really dumb decisions, and part of that probably is due to, he's playing for Golden State, who's just kind of at the tail end of this dynasty. There's probably a lot of pressure on him, right, to kind of make things happen, because he's playing with these future Hall of Famers, and as a young player, that's probably a pretty crappy environment to play in, because there's probably a fear of making mistakes, and with him, I think the mistakes, are very obvious. They take a very crazy form. So I think him moving to Washington, where he's essentially going to be probably the number 1 or number 2 option. Kyle Kuzma probably is the other guy. I kind of like that move a lot for Jordan Poole. Washington is going to be, the pool party, right? He's going to be able to kind of shoot and do whatever he wants with reckless abandon and not have a future Hall of Famer staring daggers at him when he commits a dumb turnover. So I kind of like Jordan Poole for Most Improved. Then the other guy I have, Cade Cunningham. This one might be cheating. I don't know, because he was hurt pretty much all of last year. But he is going to be the best player on the Pistons. Pistons, I think, will be a little bit better. And then he has the skill set to be Luka. Like, he has the size and the passing ability, and the ability to get to the basket, where you're like, is this just an American Luka Doncic? Like, what's happening here? So he has the ability to be like this Luka type player, and I think he will be the best player on the Pistons. So with that said, I think I'm gonna go with Cade as most improved, just beating out Jordan Poole. I think the Pistons will be a little bit better than Washington. I think Cade Cunningham has a real chance of being an all-star this year, especially if he kind of blows it up out of the gate. And he's got that skill set that, teams are like, oh my God, a big playmaking point guard that, the NBA world as a whole, like they drool over that type of player. So yeah, I like Cade Cunningham as most improved. Again, might be cheating a little bit, but I like the pick. Finally, the last award that I'm going to predict this year, and I think it's really the only one left. Coach of the Year. It's the other major award. So it generally goes to a top 3 seed. Not surprising, right? It's essentially team performance based. Almost always a top 3 seed. Many times the number 1 seed in a conference will win it. There's a couple exceptions to the top 3 seed rule. Tom Thibodeau for the Knicks in 2020, 21. Scott Brooks for the Thunder in 2009, 2010, where they were 8 seed. And then Hubie Brown for the Grizzlies in 2003, 2004. That's just like kind of looking at the last like 20-ish years. With some of these, the Thunder, they were an 8 seed, but they also won 50 games. So that's almost like a weird one. That was when there was that time where there was just this cluster of all of these really good teams in the West, and you could win 49 games and still miss the playoffs. So that one almost isn't even an exception because a lot of other years that's a 3 seed. So yeah, and then there's only been 3 cases since 2000 where the coach didn't win 60% of their games. And those 3 cases where they didn't win 60%. So if you win 60% of your games, you're winning at least 50. You're going to be a top probably 3 to 4 seed, right? And really the only times that a team wasn't, didn't hit that 60% of their game mark, in terms of wins, there were all cases where a team took a garbage team or a coach took a garbage team from the year before that was, way out of the playoffs, and ended up, improving them a bunch, making them, at least a playoff team that next year. I think was kind of the case for Tom Thibodeau, with the Knicks. I think the year before they were finished 12th in the East or something. So, kind of based on, just how I see the season kind of playing out, that really leaves kind of like 7 or 8 potential candidates, which is a lot to narrow down. You have Joe Mazzulla with the Celtics, probably number 1 in the East. Adrian Griffin with the Bucks. I like them to finish number 2. Nick Nurse with the 76ers. Assuming that Harden leaves, I like them 3rd in the East. Or Harden stays, I should say. I like them 3rd in the East. If Harden does leave and Philly doesn't get an equivalent, I probably like JB Bickerstaff at the Cavs to kind of take that number 3 seed in the East. And then on the West side, Mike Malone with the Nuggets. I think they're going to be the number 1 seed. Frank Vogel with the Suns, and Darvin Ham with the Lakers. And then the other one that's kind of a dark horse and kind of fits more into the their team made a big improvement category is I don't know how to say his name, and I apologize. Mark Daigneault. Yeah, that sounds right. Mark Daigneault. Nailed it. With Oklahoma City. I think that's the one team that's going to make some huge improvements over the next season with their young talent. Again, I had them finishing, I had them 6th in the West with my season predictions. They're going to be really good, so I think he will have an opportunity to win Coach of the Year if they do make that leap, kind of more based on the improvement from the previous year type of scenario. So those are kind of the candidates I have. So with this one, I'm going to go with my heart, and I'm going to go with Mike Malone as Coach of the Year. It's not just my heart. I do have reasoning behind it. So, one, I'm wearing a Nuggets jersey. Nuggets gear, championship hat. I got Maxie the Miner on my pullover. But outside of that, I think there's a case that the Nuggets actually could have been better last year. To start the year, Murray was still working his way back from his injury. It took him probably a month or 2 to kind of, I think, feel comfortable playing NBA level basketball again. And then there's the whole Jokic probably took his foot. It seemed, I don't want to say he did this, but it seemed like he took his foot off the gas a little bit to end the year, and the Nuggets as a whole did. And it's been speculated, and I think it's very fair that he, with the whole MVP debate and how freaking exhausting and just ridiculous and stupid that was. I still don't like Kendrick Perkins for his whole contribution to that whole thing. I think there's a case the Nuggets had the beginning of the season and the end of the season where they could have played a lot better. Had they had a fully healthy team, at least, Murray was kind of back more to who we know him to be now. And then near the end of the year, there wasn't that whole just MVP, just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was the stupidest thing. So I think knowing the Nuggets are kind of bringing back a lot of their same team, right? All 5 starters are back. You have some improvements from Christian Brown. You have Peyton Watson. You have, a young bench, but I think still a very effective bench. Will be a very effective bench. I think they have a good shot of improving on last year. They were the 1 seed, which, if the Nuggets are the 1 seed again and they win 65 games rather than, they win this year, like 53, something like that. 53 games. I think at that point you gotta have Malone, coach of the year. The only exception would be if someone else also has a ridiculously historic season. Like, let's just say Boston runs away with the East, wins 65 games. Joe Mazzulla probably deserves it there. But I like the Nuggets to do something similar, given, what they were last year, how they kind of changed in the offseason, which wasn't a whole lot, which is good in this case, and kind of how I think they can improve. So, Coach of the Year, Mike Malone, homer pick. I had to have one of them. All right, that's it for me today. Thank you so much for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, again, we got video format now. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate all the support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow on all the things, your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, whatever. And then also I'm on socials, Instagram and X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it now. Are the two I'm probably most active on. That's at the Initial NBA Show is the tag. So don't forget to follow there. You'll get heads up with any new episodes, any new content that drops, and I'll probably give my 2 cents on anything happening basketball wise. But yeah, next episode will be in the thick of the NBA season, at least at the start of it. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed. See you guys next time.